We want to welcome you back to Sunday school this morning, and I've got my helper here, old Clementine, and she's helping me get organized for this morning's Sunday school lesson. And we are up to Genesis 11, which is the very interesting story about the Tower of Babel. Isn't that interesting a little bit? So, have you ever wondered why people on the earth speak different languages? Well, you ever wonder why cats tear up God's eye trees? Don't eat the God's eye a little bit. Clementine, oh geez. Anyway, so today's story gives us a little insight on the origins of why different languages exist. And if you have your Bible, the Bible we gave you, the NRSV, but any Bible will work if you don't have this one. We're looking in the very first book of the Bible, Genesis, and we are in chapter 11, right here, where it says the Tower of Babel. And sometimes it's good just to read the story, and if you want to pause this while you read the first 9 verses, you can, and then after you read it, you can I can share you my thoughts, and you may want to catch me sometime and share your thoughts about it. A lot of different opinions about this story, but the story begins by the author telling us that everybody on the earth spoke one language at this time, and I guess that kind of makes sense. We came from Adam and Eve, and they would have spoke one language, and all their children would have essentially spoke the language that God had given them. And we're not quite sure we know what that language is. Could be Hebrew, could be something else. We don't know. But we do know at this point in time, this is after the flood. We're still not 100% sure time-wise where we're at. It's probably before 2000 BC for sure. Could be a lot farther back than that. But in any event, everyone is speaking one language. And everybody in this area, and we're still in probably southern Mesopotamia, where Iraq is today, everyone decided to build a really huge tower. I mean, big, at least by their standards. And I'm going to read verse 4 just to kind of give us an idea of what's going on here. And verse 4 says, "Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth.'" So we know that they wanted to build this tower to make a name for themselves. What do you think God thought about that? Well, we know a little bit about what God thought about that, because in verse 5 and 6 it tells us, "The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the mortals had built." So they did build the tower. "And the Lord said, 'Look, they are one people, and they all have one language. And this is only the beginning of what they'll do. Nothing they promised to do will now be impossible for them.'" So God was a little concerned that they were being self-sufficient here and were able to build this tower. So how do you think God reacted to that? What do you think he did? Well, verse 7 tells us. He says, "Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them from abroad there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. You know, it's really hard to communicate with someone if you don't speak the same language. I mean, you can use kind of your hands or whatever, but it's really hard. I've been in other countries that didn't speak English, And it's difficult just to even order off the menu or find a bathroom or the hotel you're looking for. It's really hard. It would be impossible to build a big old huge tower if you weren't able to understand your coworkers and all the difficult stuff that goes in to building those things. So, when God confused their speech, it made it impossible for them to continue building these things. And then it's interesting that verse 9, that this area, it says, therefore it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And it's interesting, the word babble. I don't know if you've ever heard somebody say, well, so-and-so is just babbling on, or I think they're just babbling about something. That comes from this story. The word babble means that they're talking nonsensical or you can't understand what they're saying. A lot like Clementine when she's trying to communicate to me and she meows, it just sounds like babble. I don't know what she's saying. I call her Little Bit a lot of times because she used to be really little and now she's not so much because she eats a lot. But any event, it's an interesting note from this story is back in verse 7 where it says God talks, he says, come, let us go down. Who do you think us is? I wonder if he's talking about the angels or some other beings in heaven. We don't know. It just says, come, let us go down, and confuse the language. I just think that's kind of interesting. That's one of those little nuances in the story a lot of people don't catch, but I think I'll be curious to know what you think that means, who he means by us going down to confuse the language. The moral of this story and what I get out of it is this. The people of Babel, when they were trying to build this big tower, which a lot of people think were ziggurats. If you ever want to Google the word ziggurat, you can actually still see some of the towers that used to be built back in that area at the time. They still exist, parts of them. So if you Google ziggurat, Ziggurat, you can see pictures of those. But when people used to build those, they were doing it to make a name for themselves. They wanted to leave something on this earth to say, look how great I am. I don't need God. I don't need other people. I did this myself. Look at me. Look how awesome I am. And I think God didn't like that because he likes us to act in a way that glorifies him, that worships him. And I think had they gone at it at that attitude, then perhaps he would not have minded them having a tower. But yet they wanted to do it, make a name for themselves. And so when we work for our own glory, I don't think God is with us. When we work to glorify him, then he is there. He is there to support us, to love us, to help us overcome those obstacles. When we're trying to be selfish, I don't think we get his support. When we're trying to help others or to bring glory to him, then I think he is there right by our side, helping us out, maybe in ways we'll never understand. Now, if you really want to get advanced on this, really want to look at some interesting things about chapter 11 of Genesis. If you go on through verse 10 through 26, which is just talking about Shem's descendants, that's one of Noah's sons. The years that they say in there, like for example, Eber lived 34 years, Peleg lives 30 years. If you look at older versions of the Bible, like the Dead Sea Scrolls of this book, it actually says 134 years or 130 years, like 100 years was dropped off. And it's kind of interesting that those versions are a little different from the version we have here. So if you ever want to catch me and want to talk about why that might be, it's really an interesting study and question. It does not affect the fact that our Bible might be slightly different from some of the older, more original versions. Doesn't bother me much because all we're talking about are years here. The message is still the same throughout the Bible. So I think I'll catch me sometime and we'll talk about that. I want to talk about the workbook. When we last left off, we were up to page 60. So what I'm going to have you do is page 61, 62, and 63. So only 3 pages today. And that'll allow anyone who might be behind to get caught up a little bit. The pages are short. It would be really easy to get up to page 63 if you haven't quite got there yet. If you don't have a workbook, let me or Ann Bruce know, and we will make sure you have one. This particular one, pages we're still learning about verses, because Little Bit really loves to learn about verses of the Bible, don't you, Little Bit? Yeah, she's got the chapters down, so she's still having a hard time with the verses. So the verses they have you practice on are about the 10 Commandments, so that's interesting. They're in Exodus. That's the 2nd book of the Bible. So after I log off here, me and Little Bit are going to practice a little bit, aren't we? We're going to learn our little verses in Exodus. So hopefully you'll get to work up to page 63. And I look forward to seeing you all hopefully soon. If you have any questions, you're always willing to call me. And I hope you have a wonderful week and God bless.